Committee on Energy will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the subcommittee at any time. Welcome to today's hearing entitled The Future of U.S. Fusion Energy Research. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Today, we will hear from a panel of experts on the status of U.S. fusion energy research and discuss what we can do as a nation to advance this critical area of discovery science. The goal of fusion research is to create a star here on Earth and control it to the point that we can convert its immense heat into electricity. Easy, right? In the center of stars like our sun, extreme temperatures, pressures, and gravitational conditions create a unique natural environment for fusion to occur. On Earth, scientists push the boundaries of experimental physics in a number of ways to duplicate these reactions with the hopes of eventually generating fusion energy as power we can use in everyday activities. The potential benefits to society from a fusion reactor are beyond calculation. The fuel is abundant and widely accessible. The carbon footprint is zero, and the radioactive waste concerns are very minimal. Despite these incentives, fusion energy science remains one of the most challenging areas of experimental physics today. Generally speaking, and don't worry, I will leave the detailed explanation to our panel of expert witnesses, fusion energy science is the applied study of a plasma or ionized gas, and is dependent on three main conditions: plasma temperature, density, and confinement time. During this hearing, you'll hear terms like inertial confinement and tokamak. These are different techniques and devices used by scientists to control these three quantities in their experiments as they work successfully to generate fusion energy. The Department of Energy, DOE, supports fusion research primarily through its Fusion Energy Sciences, FES, program within the Office of Science. Domestically, it funds robust research through its national labs and partnerships with industry. At Lawrence Livermore National Lab, the National Ignition Facility, or NIF, pursues ignition in the lab by using a high-energy laser to induce inertial fusion and provide critical science for DOE's nuclear stockpile stewardship mission. The D3D National Fusion Facility, a DOE user facility managed by General Atomics, is the largest magnetic fusion facility in the United States. This program seeks to provide solutions to operational issues that are critical to the success of tokamak-style fusion reactors like the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, ITER, project. Considered the leading research innovation initiative in fusion science, the ITER project is a major international collaboration to design, to build, and to operate a first-of-a-kind research facility to achieve and maintain a successful fusion reaction in the lab. Though located in France, ITER is also a U.S. research project. Over 80% of total U.S. awards and obligations to ITER are carried out in the United States. As of December 2017, the U.S. ITER organization has awarded more than $975 million in research and engineering funding to approximately 600 United States laboratories, companies, and universities. The DOE's fiscal year 2019 budget request for ITER is $75 million, well below the required commitment level to keep the project on track. If enacted, this may result in damaging delays to the ITER project and sends the wrong message to the international fusion community about America's commitment to its international agreements and our leadership in science. When determining the next steps for the domestic U.S. fusion energy program, we must consider the importance of access to the ITER reactor for American researchers and America's standing and credibility as a global scientific collaborator. If the U.S. is going to lead the world in cutting-edge science, and we hope it does, we cannot take our commitments to our international partners lightly. I want to thank our accomplished panel of witnesses for their testimonies today, and I look forward to a productive discussion about this exciting area of research. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from California, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much. Just a note that the actual ranking member is in Texas today. It's the election day in Texas. So I'm happy to be able to fill in. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and for the wonderful witnesses that we have before us. As the chairman has said, fusion is the process that powers the sun and stars, so we know it works. But as all the witnesses here will be able to discuss in far more detail than me, controlling and harnessing a fusion plasma here on Earth is one of the most difficult challenges that our nation and indeed the world's top scientists and engineers are working to address. That said, if we're successful, then fusion has the potential to provide abundant, reliable, emission-free, and practically limitless energy to meet a large portion of our electricity needs in the foreseeable future. Given the huge potential benefits of developing a viable approach to fusion energy, I believe that this is an area we should be strongly investing in. Unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing in the Department of Energy's recent budget request for fiscal year 2019, which would cut the Office of Science's Fusion Research Program by about 11% and would also entirely eliminate ARPA-E, which is currently supporting a portfolio of innovative fusion projects that could point the way to producing fusion energy quickly and at lower cost. Lastly, as I'm sure we'll learn more about from Dr. Herrmann, the budget for the DOE NNSA inertial confinement fusion program, including support for the National Ignition Facility at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, would be slashed by 20%. Now, the focus of this program is actually, of course, not on energy, but on ensuring the reliability of our nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. Yet, because there is currently no ongoing federally supported program to develop inertial fusion concepts specifically for energy applications, this weapons-relevant work is currently the only way that many of these concepts are able to advance. So these major cuts could be, very bad for both our national security and our energy future. I'd like to note, as the chairman has, that support for the U.S. contribution to ITER would receive an increase in this request, but that the actual level of $75 million is below our obligation. The most recent official estimates we've received from the department projected our contribution to be at least $230 million in fiscal year 18 and $240 million in fiscal year 19. And it reminds me, several years ago, we were concerned and expressed concern at this committee about whether our international partners would in the end live up to their obligation. They have, and it's now the U.S. that is at risk of being the deadbeat. So I'm hopeful that we can address that. These lower investments do not reflect Dr. Bigot's tenure and the progress that has been made at the site, and we look forward to hearing from him. I'll just note that the good news is that fusion energy science research has always had bipartisan support here in the committee and in the Congress. It's always hard to fund what you believe in, but I'm hopeful that we will make progress in that regard, again, on a bipartisan basis. And I've had a personal interest in fusion energy since my time first began here in Congress, and I'm hopeful that that long-term interest will finally pay dividends in ignition at one of our leading science facilities. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the hearing and yield back.
Thanks, the gentlelady. Let me introduce our witnesses. And Doctor, I'm coming to you first. Is it? Oh,
that's okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to see you so eager to get on with the hearing, too. And a good hearing it is.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Stop while I'm ahead. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Today we will hear about the status of fusion energy research and the prospects of future scientific discoveries in fusion energy. The basic purpose of fusion energy is to create the equivalent of the power source of a star here on Earth. By creating and controlling the same nuclear reactions that occur in a star within a fusion reactor, heat from these reactions could be converted into renewable and reliable electricity. It is no surprise that fusion has captured the imagination of scientists and engineers for over half a century. The Department of Energy has supported basic research in fusion energy since 1951. The DOE Office of Science Fusion Energy Science Program funds research and science infrastructure at DOE national labs. At the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, scientists conduct fusion research through the National Spherical Torus Experiment Upgrade User Facility. NSTXU is a magnetic confinement fusion device called a spherical tokamak that is currently the most powerful device of its kind in the world. At Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, the National Ignition Facility uses the world's largest and highest energy laser to generate fusion power in the lab with an alternative technique called inertial confinement fusion. DOE also funds world-class fusion research through its partnerships with industry. At General Atomics, a defense contractor based in California, the D3D National Fusion Facility is a tokamak fusion research facility that operates as a DOE user facility through the Office of Science. D3D enables scientists from laboratories, private sector organizations, and universities around the world to carry out experiments in cutting-edge fusion research. Someday, the results of this research may provide the scientific foundation for producing power through fusion. This would obviously reduce carbon emissions by a huge amount, with major implications for climate change. The ultimate goal in fusion energy science is to provide a sustainable, renewable, zero-emissions energy source. While we cannot predict when fusion will be a viable part of our energy portfolio, it is clear that this is critical basic science that could benefit future generations. One major step toward achieving this goal is the ITER project. ITER is a multinational collaborative effort to build the world's largest tokamak-type fusion reactor in southern France. Sponsored by the European Union, India, Japan, China, Russia, South Korea, and the United States, the ITER project can help answer fundamental challenges in plasma physics and is a key step in achieving commercial fusion energy. The Director General of ITER, Dr. Bernard Bigot, will provide an update on the project's advances and challenges for the committee today. I want to specifically thank him for his leadership of this complex and challenging international research project. By contributing 9% of the cost to construct ITER, American scientists will be able to access 100% of the discoveries achieved through the project. That's why it is imperative that the U.S. meet its obligations to ITER and fully fund fusion research at the department. According to the research community, a minimum of $163 million for in-kind contributions and $50 million in cash contributions in fiscal year 2019 is necessary to maintain the scheduled U.S. contribution to the project. Unfortunately, DOE's fiscal year 2019 budget request for ITER is only $75 million. Reduced annual funding will only delay ITER instruments being built here in the U.S. and cause construction delays that increase overall project cost. With countries like India, Japan, China, and Russia partnering through ITER to produce and share cutting-edge fusion research, we cannot afford to lose our seat at the table. In addition, we cannot expect to receive international support for our domestically hosted global research projects like the high-priority long baseline neutrino facility at Fermilab if we do not honor our international obligations. Basic research, like fusion science, provides the underpinnings for groundbreaking new energy technology. Achieving commercial fusion energy technology will require strong U.S. leadership and consistent investment in discovery science. To maintain our competitive advantage as a world leader in science, we must meet our international commitments and continue to support the research that will lead to next-generation energy technologies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Let me now introduce our witnesses. Our first witness today is Dr. Bernard Bigot, Director General of the ITER organization. In his distinguished career, Dr. Bigot has held senior positions in research, higher education, and government. Prior to his appointment at ITER, He completed 2 terms as chairman and CEO of the French Alternative Energies and Atomic Energy Commission, or CEA. Dr. Bigot was trained at the ENS St. Cloud and holds an aggregation, the highest level teaching diploma in France, in physical science, and a PhD in chemistry. Welcome, Dr. Bigot. Our next witness is Dr. James W. Van Dam. Am I saying that right? Okay. Acting Associate Director of Fusion Energy Sciences in the Office of Science at the Department of Energy. Previously, Dr. Van Dam was a research scientist, Associate Director, and Director of the Institute for Fusion Studies at the University of Texas in Austin. He was also Director of the U.S. Burning Plasma Organization and Chief Scientist for the U.S. ITER Project Office. Dr. Van Dam completed his graduate study at University of California, Berkeley, and the Institute of Plasma Physics in Japan. He received his PhD at UCLA and was a postdoc at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. Welcome, Dr. Van Dam. Our third witness is Dr. Mickey Wade, the Director of Advanced Fusion Systems of the Magnetic Fusion Energy Division of General Atomics. Prior to serving in this role, Dr. Wade was the director of the D3D National Fusion Program, the largest fusion research program in the United States with roughly 500 researchers from over 90 institutions from around the world. Dr. Wade received his PhD in nuclear engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1991. He is the author of over 30 first author papers, a fellow of the American Physical Society, and has served on the editorial boards of Nuclear Fusion and Physics of Plasmas. Welcome, Dr. Wade. I will now recognize the ranking member, the gentlelady from California, to introduce our last witness.
Thank you. I'd like to, although Lawrence Livermore lab is not in my district, it's in the neighborhood, and so I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Mark Herrmann, who's the director of the National Ignition Facility at Lawrence. As the director of NIF, Dr. Herrmann manages an experimental science facility that serves the National Nuclear Security Administration's stockpile stewardship program, and he pushes the frontier of inertial confinement fusion and discovery science. Before coming to NIF, Dr. Herrmann spent 9 years at Sandia National Labs, and prior to that, he was a physicist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He's a fellow of the American Physical Society. He's won numerous awards for his scientific work and leadership in his field. He received his undergraduate degrees from Washington University at St. Louis and completed his PhD from the Plasma Physics program at Princeton University. Thank you for being here, Dr. Herrmann. We look forward to hearing from you. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. I now recognize Dr. Bigot for 5 minutes to present his testimony. Dr. Bigot.
Thank you very much, Chairman Weber and distinguished members of the committees, for giving me the opportunity to present you the updated information on the ITER project. The slide shows the current status of the ITER site and the tokamak building and the assembly hall at the center. Today, March 6th, is precisely my 3 years anniversary as ITER Director General. In March 2015, as you can see, after 7 years, the progress was quite slow. At that time, the ITER project was in urgent need of reform. I believe we can say with confidence 3 years later, looking at this new slide, that the question raised by several ITER members in 2013, 2014 about the capacity to manage this complex international construction project have been properly answered. As of November 2017, the ITER project has crossed a significant milestone, the completion of 50% of the total construction work scope through first plasma. These terms include design, component, manufacturing, building construction, shipping, and delivery, assembly, and installation. This is no small achievement. Globally, these project performance indicators show the ITER project is progressing with reliability. On the work site, as you see, the tokamak complex, including the tokamak building, the diagnostic buildings, and the tritium buildings, is advancing rapidly. The assembling hall is complete and turned over for assembly of the internal equipment. Similar progress is being made on the cryo plant, magnet power, conversion building, the cooling water system, and other buildings across the work site. Fabrication of the ITER component, both on-site and globally worldwide, is showing equal momentum. This includes the most complex and major component, such as vacuum vessel segments progressing in Korea and Europe, the cryostat manufactured by India, thermal shield in mass production in Korea, and all superconducting magnets, from the central solenoids here in the US to toroidal field magnets in Italy and Japan, and poloidal field magnets in Europe, Russia, and China. Many first-of-a-kind components are requiring an unprecedented combination of size and precision. The further we progress, the more this project illustrates the interdependency of our overall performance. This performance also is the best evidence of our organizational reforms since 2015. A clear decision-making process, profound integration of the work of the 7 ITER members and with the ITER organization, a reliable schedule, and above all, strong international project management and project culture. I am pleased to report continuing validation from external reviews. When I last spoke to this committee in April 2016, we had received the report of the independent ITER Council Review Group, which was followed 1 month later by the positive and cautiously optimistic report by the US Secretary of Energy. Since that time, we had reviews on many aspects of project management, as you see on the slide. Each of these reviews has found that the ITER project is well managed while helping us to refine further our methods. We are committed to continuous improvement. In April 2016, I reported to this committee that we had set up technical and organizational milestones to demonstrate to the ITER Council that the project is staying on track for success. I am pleased to say that 31 milestones have now been achieved from January 2016 through first plasma. We remain on track for first plasma in 2025. Again, this consistent progress cannot be taken for granted. It demands the collective commitment of all ITER members. This brings me to my final and most important point, to thank the committee for placing this ITER status update in context, because ITER must be understood as an integral element of US fusion research and the next major step toward a burning or self-eating plasma, as underlined by the recent preliminary report of the US National Academies. ITER is a converging next step in the fusion research roadmap of the US and every ITER members. A shortfall in the contribution of any single member, if it impacts the delivery of component or the capacity of ITER to meet the assembly and installation schedule, will have a cascading strong effect in delays, cost, and the disruption of fusion research for every other members. It is why I would like to urge the US to timely comply with their contribution commitment. We are committed at ITER, as you see on this slide, day and night to make this project the model for international collaboration in complex science and technology. We are committed to making ITER a sound investment for the United States and as for all our partners. We look forward to a long and fruitful collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bigot. Dr. Van Dam, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Weber and Ranking Member Lofgren in place of Ranking Member Vesey, and also Full Committee Chair Smith, my former congressman from Austin, Texas, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for this invitation to testify before you today about fusion energy research. I am currently the Acting Associate Director for the Office of Fusion Energy Sciences, and I appreciate this opportunity to review the status of fusion research and describe programmatic directions going forward. The mission of the Fusion Energy Sciences, or FES program, is to expand the fundamental understanding of matter at very high temperatures and densities and to build the scientific foundation needed to develop a fusion energy source. This is accomplished through the study of plasma, called the fourth state of matter, which is wide-ranging since 99% of the visible universe is plasma. The FES program addresses several administration research and development priorities. Fusion research has the potential to contribute to American energy dominance by making available a robust, clean, baseload electricity technology. Plasma science can contribute to American prosperity through the potential for spin-off applications. Established partnerships within and outside DOE increase our research effectiveness, and we also help train a STEM-focused workforce in key areas of technological and economic importance, as well as national security. The D3D National Fusion Facility at General Atomics and the National Spherical Torus Experiment Upgrade NSTX at Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory are world-leading Office of Science user facilities. The D3D scientific team has 439 researchers from 49 U.S. institutions, plus another 164 researchers from 46 institutions in 7 other countries. The D3D scientific results are recognized worldwide. NSTX-U is the world's highest performance spherical tokamak, a magnetic configuration invented in the U.S. with attractive advantages of compactness and component testing. NSTX-U is currently not operating while its magnetic coils are being repaired. The United States is a world leader in fusion theoretical modeling and high-performance computer simulations. FES supports 8 multi-institutional scientific discovery through advanced computing SciDAC centers jointly with the Advanced Scientific Computing Research Program Office. Fusion researchers also lead one of the Office of Science exascale computing projects. Several multi-institutional U.S. teams conduct research under international partnerships on superconducting tokamaks and stellarators with long-duration capabilities not available in the U.S. To test fusion materials under extreme conditions, the FY 2019 budget request proposes a linear diverter simulator facility with world-leading capabilities. Under the U.S. contributions to ITER construction project, we are fabricating several hardware systems. One is the central solenoid, which will be the world's largest superconducting pulsed electromagnet, the so-called heartbeat of ITER. The U.S. first plasma sub-project is halfway finished. The U.S. has spent $1 billion, 90% of which within the U.S., through approximately 600 contracts in 44 states. The U.S. ITER project is very well managed. The ITER organization has significantly improved its project management under Director General Bigot, and we thank him. Construction progress on site is very substantial. FES also supports discovery plasma science through partnerships with the National Science Foundation and DOE's National Nuclear Security Administration. U.S. scientists are world leaders in inventing new plasma measurement techniques. Strategic directions going forward for the FES program are informed by several planning efforts, including priorities described in the document, the Office of Science's Fusion Energy Sciences Program, a 10-year perspective, research opportunities identified in recent community workshops, one of which was led by Dr. Wade, reports from the Fusion Energy Sciences Advisory Committee, and reports from the National Academy of Sciences. Currently, a National Academy study on a strategic plan for U.S. burning plasma research is underway. Dr. Herrmann is one of the panel members. And also the National Academy is now launching the 2020 Plasma Decadal Survey. Thank you for this opportunity today to describe DOE's research efforts in fusion energy sciences research, and I look forward to discussing this topic with you and answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wade. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the committee for this opportunity to share my views on the U.S. Fusion program. I'd like to stress that these are my views and not necessarily those of my employer. I have spent nearly 30 years working in fusion research, 15 of those at Oak Ridge National Lab and the last dozen at General Atomics. I'm passionate about fusion energy and maybe as importantly about the role the U.S. can play in its development. This marks the 80th anniversary of the discovery of the process that powers our sun and stars, nuclear fusion. We've made a remarkable progress over the intervening 80 years in figuring out how to harness the enormous potential of fusion energy. The U.S. has been at the forefront of this progress, forging a path that has taken fusion energy from a dream to a potential energy source for thousands of years. Critics can no longer say that fusion is 50 years away and always will be. As we've just heard from Dr. Bigot, the first phase of construction of the most ambitious fusion project ever undertaken, ITER, is now 50% complete. In 2025, a little over 7 years from now, ITER will produce its first plasma. Just 10 years later, ITER will begin an operations phase that will produce power plant levels of fusion power for the first time. Anticipating this, other nations are increasing their emphasis on fusion energy, putting together strategic plans to capitalize on ITER's success. Private enterprises are now evaluating high-risk, outside-the-box approaches to fusion energy. Yet as excited as I am about this future, I'm very concerned that our nation's commitment to fusion is wavering, and the decisions our country is making now will relegate us to the sidelines in the future. U.S. participation in ITER is in question. Investment in U.S. fusion capabilities is being far outpaced by other nations, particularly China. The U.S. does not have a comprehensive strategic plan for fusion development. The U.S. has long been a world leader in fusion energy research, and this continues today. U.S. scientists continue to discover new phenomena and develop pioneering solutions to fusion's challenges. The U.S. is building the ITER central solenoid. When fully assembled, it will be nearly as wide as this table, nearly as tall as this building, and be the most powerful electromagnet in the world. It will be the heart of ITER, enabling ITER to generate plasma temperatures that exceed 150 million degrees, about 10 times the temperature of the sun. So what needs to be done? I offer 2 recommendations for your consideration. Number 1, the U.S. should make a firm commitment to fully fund the ITER project. The early days of ITER were very challenging, but it appears the ship is now sailing in calm waters thanks to the efforts of Dr. Bigot and the ITER members. I believe ITER is our ticket to be a Tier 1 player in fusion development, giving us full access to the preeminent fusion facility in the world for only 9% of the fusion project cost. Over 80% of these contributions are for in-kind projects built in the U.S., creating jobs and associated expertise here. On the flip side, withdrawing from ITER could isolate U.S. scientists from the international effort and would require a new U.S. approach to study of burning plasma with an unknown time horizon and cost. Number 2, the U.S. should move now to establish a comprehensive strategic plan that seeks to capitalize on ITER's success. Fusion energy should be called out in a national energy policy. A strategic plan with clearly defined technical objectives should be developed that sets the U.S. on an aggressive, distinctive pathway to fusion energy. This pathway should include new investment in world-class research capabilities that will attract and engage the best U.S. minds from universities, national labs, and the private sector. Following through on initiatives evaluating new ideas and developing transformational technologies will all be required in arriving at the most cost-attractive approach for fusion development. In 1962, at the beginning of the Apollo program, President John F. Kennedy issued a proclamation that I think speaks into this hearing today. He said, and I quote, "We choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win." Less than 7 years later, an American walked on the moon. It's in the American DNA to take on the grandest challenges and not just succeed, but be the best. Fusion is one of those grand challenges. I hope you will join us in forging a path that ensures the U.S. is a world leader in making fusion energy a reality for future generations. Thank you for your opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to your questions and working with you in the future.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, is it Herrmann or Herrmann?
It's Herrmann.
Okay, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Weber, Congresswoman Lofgren, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee and offer testimony on the future of fusion energy research. As was already mentioned, I'm the director of the National Ignition Facility, or NIF, at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which is sponsored by the National Nuclear Security Administration. NIF is a football stadium-sized facility containing the world's most energetic laser. I've had the pleasure of giving NIF tours to several members of the committee, and of course, I'd be happy to show off the incredible work done by our scientists and engineers to those of you who haven't had a chance to visit. NIF's lasers are focused onto targets smaller than a pencil eraser to create conditions of very high temperatures and pressures called high energy density, or HED. Since greater than 99% of the yield of our nuclear weapons comes in the HED state, HED experiments are a critical component of the Science-Based Stockpile Stewardship Program, which has the goal of ensuring that our nuclear stockpile remains safe, secure, and effective in the absence of further explosive nuclear underground testing. In addition to NIF, the Z-Pulse Power Facility and the Omega Laser Facility play complementary roles in the Stockpile Stewardship Program. Experiments on NIF are providing data in important regimes to both enhance and test our simulations of our nuclear weapons. Simulations are incredibly powerful tools, especially now that we're getting better and better computers, but it is essential that they be compared to data in order to avoid getting the wrong answers. NIFZ and Omega also play a major role in recruiting and training the scientists and engineers who are the next generation of stockpile stewards. One of stewardship's grand scientific challenges established at the birth of the program is to achieve fusion ignition in the laboratory. Ignition is when the energy released from the fusion reactions further heats the fusion fuel, referred to as self-heating, leading to more reactions and a large release of energy. Pursuit of ignition provides the U.S. with an experimental platform to study many incompletely understood aspects of nuclear weapons performance. In contrast to magnetic confinement fusion, inertial confinement fusion is obtained by squeezing the fusion fuel to higher pressures and temperatures than found at the center of the sun. Early experiments on NIF ending in 2012 fell far short of achieving ignition despite optimistic projections. A number of experiments were then performed and many gaps in our understanding were identified. In 2016, NNSA established a goal for 2020 to assess the efficacy of NIF for achieving ignition. Today, we are on track at the halfway point of that goal. In fact, last year, improvements enabled the fusion yield in the best implosions on NIF to date to more than double the previous record yield to over 50 kilojoules. That's 25 times higher than the fusion yields in 2012. These implosions have demonstrated modest self-heating, a critical step on the path to ignition that's akin to trying to light a campfire and having the wood start to smoke. Simulations suggest that a 30% enhancement in either the pressure or the confinement time of this plasma would bring us to ignition, although it is possible that the simulations could be wrong, which is why, of course, we do experiments. We are now pursuing several exciting directions for improving the fusion yield at NIF. If ignition is obtained on NIF, it would be the first time ever in the laboratory, and such a breakthrough could open a possible path to inertial fusion energy, or IFE, that could have significantly different technological risks than magnetic fusion approaches we've been hearing about today. An IFE system would work by using a driver, like a laser, to ignite targets multiple times per second. To be clear, NNSA does not have an energy mission, and IFE research is not being performed at NIF today. The National Academy of Sciences studied IFE in 2013, and their report concluded that the appropriate time for the establishment of a national coordinated broad-based IFE program within DOE would be when ignition is achieved. However, the committee also concluded that the potential benefits of energy from ICF also provide a compelling rationale for including IFE R&D as part of the long-term R&D portfolio for U.S. energy. This is an important conclusion of the NAS report. A number of promising technologies highlighted in the NAS report as key to eventual IFE systems are making steady progress, but without an IFE program, the U.S. is not in a position to assess the significance of these advances. A modest IFE investment is all the more justified given that the U.S. leads the world in that high energy density science. NIF, for example, operates with 10 times the energy of the next largest laser in the world, which is in China. There are few remaining fields of science where the U.S. currently maintains such a lead over the rest of the world. This world leadership, along with the compelling scientific opportunities, such as the grand challenge of ignition, have been a magnet for the best and brightest scientists and engineers to pursue research on the NIF and to join the Stockpile Stewardship Program. Today, the rest of the world is aggressively catching up. NIF-scale lasers are under construction in both France and Russia. The Chinese are exploring designs for lasers that are 1.5 to 3 times NIF scale. And in high-intensity lasers, leadership has shifted from the U.S., where they were invented, to Europe and Asia, as noted in a recent NAS study. While the world is investing more in HED science, the FY19 President's budget request reduces funding for the National ICF program by more than 20% relative to FY17, a reduction of more than $100 million. The proposed budget reduces funding for NIF by more than $60 million, zero support for target fabrication at General Atomics, and includes major cuts to the Omega Laser facility, putting the facility on a path to closure over the next 3 years. The academic programs that are essential to the field's future are also zeroed. Together, these cuts cripple our academic partners and could lead to the loss of a generation of early career HED scientists and students. At Livermore, the proposed cuts will lead to a major disruption in our ability to provide the HED experiments needed to support both near-term and long-term stewardship deliverables, and the cuts will strongly impact the pursuit of fusion ignition, leading to a multi-year delay of the goal set out in 2020. We are working closely with NNSA and our national partners to manage the impacts of these cuts should they be enacted and remain focused on the highest priority deliverables of the stewardship program. But it must be understood that these cuts will have major negative implications for U.S. leadership in HED science and fusion research. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Doctor. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Bigot, in your testimony, you stressed that ITER is an integrated project whose success relies on the performance of each of its constituent members. Be as specific as you can. Could you explain what would happen to the ITER project if the U.S. fails to meet our commitments to the ITER project?
Thank you very much. It's very clear that the U.S. has two roles, even three, I would say. The first one is to provide in-kind component. And you understand maybe that this tokamak facility is a highly integrated facility in such a way that if a component is not on site and under specification on time, it will stop the whole project. The most important equipment which has to come soon is a central solenoid we spoke about. It is the backbone, I would say, of the whole facility, as well as the tokamak cooling water system. It's the system which will, extract the heat from the tokamak. There is also several diagnostics which are absolutely needed. You will see that indeed in 2018, 2019, 2020, most of the component has to be completed and to be delivered. If some of the component are not properly designed on time, it will impact everything. Second point is the ITER organization, beyond the responsibility of the US ITER organization, Domestic Agencies National Oak Ridge Laboratory. The ITER organization has the responsibility to install and assemble all these components coming from all over the world. In 2018, early 2019, I have to pass all the 9 assembling contract with some, I hope, leading company in such a way that between 2018 and 2024, 6 years, we will be able to assemble this component. So if the US don't provide the in-cash contribution, we will be behind budget. Right now, the US has not paid the in-cash contribution in 2016, 2017 is something around 70 million euro, and for 2018, we have low expectation if we stay with the 63. So it's very important that we keep in.
Thank you. My time is getting away from us a little bit. I appreciate that insight. Dr. Van Dam, let me come to you. Will the Department of Energy commit to honoring our obligations under the ITER agreement? What say you?
Well, I'm speaking on behalf of the administration. As you know, the administration is doing a review of all civil nuclear energy-related activities. ITER has been included in that, and we are waiting for that to provide a decision about whether the U.S. stays in ITER or not. In the meantime, funding is provided for the 2 highest hardware systems that we're providing. One was just mentioned, the central solenoid at General Atomics. The other is the tokamak cooling water system, also mentioned.
Of course, I served in the Texas legislature with Governor Perry for 4 years. Do you know, is the Secretary aware of this project, or how aware is he? Maybe I should ask you.
That may be beyond my pay grade, but I certainly hope he is. I know he's had letters from people like Dr. Bigot and others, and they've been given to us to write responses.
Okay.
And there is a visit coming up from state heads.
If I give you his cell phone, will you call him? Just
I remember him fondly from Texas.
Dr. Van Dam.
Would the chairman yield for a moment on that? I can speak from personal experience.
Yes, sir, you bet.
Yeah, no, the secretary is actually very plugged into it and very, very enthusiastic about this. He really, sees his role as an advocate for the entire program of which Fusion. I'd spent a day with him as he visited the 2 labs near my district, and so the answer is unquestionably yes.
Well, absolutely. Good to know. I appreciate the gentleman. Dr. Van Dam, next question. What type of research in advanced scientific computing and materials science do you think should be prioritized in order to support the fusion energy science program in the next few years?
Yes, as you know, advanced computing is a priority of the administration, I think, across the government. And for fusion energy science, we are looking to advances in exascale computing, which would really help us a lot. We have very, very big codes that we run and have been running for decades. Another area is data science, which includes machine learning. And we think there's a strong potential for quantum information science to help our field, especially in applications. Now, was that the entirety of the question, or was there?
Yeah, and I need to move on. I'm running out of time here, if I may, so thank you for that answer. This is a question for all of you, so we'll start with Dr. Bigot. Dr. Bigot, have you thought about, or what impact do you think the commercialization of fusion energy could have on climate change?
Clearly, okay, as you know, the magnetic confined, okay, plasma and the burning plasma will deliver energy without any impact on the climate. We just release helium, if we release anything, and it is a bending, chemically bending, okay, no impact on the climate, no impact on neither on the environment. So it's one of the most advantage we could expect from these technologies.
Okay, Dr. Van Dam, same question.
Yes, I would echo that answer and just say that if you look at certain Asian countries, for example, that have great problems with pollution and so forth, they are pursuing fusion very vigorously.
Right, and offline, at some point, I'd be interested in a discussion about the amount of energy that goes into the solenoid, the electromagnetic coil, how you get there, what produces that energy, and what it costs, but we'll do that at a later date. Dr. Wade?
Yes, I just echo the same answer. I will point out that fusion has the potential to be a large baseload source of electricity, which renewables without battery storage have a challenge doing that. So creating a carbon-free footprint with a large baseload will sort of transform how fusion is and how energy is produced in this world. So.
Okay, Dr. Herrmann?
Just echoing my other fellow members here, committee, the fusion is a game changer for the future energy sources of this planet. So it takes a lot of work. It's very hard to achieve fusion, but I think it's definitely worth the investment that's been made.
Okay, I think I now recognize the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was thinking about all of the great work that each one of our witnesses is doing, and I was thinking about specifically the National Ignition Facility, which I've been interested in since its inception. I think I was there at the groundbreaking in '97, and certainly when there were some glitches in the construction, but ultimately at the opening, I remember I spoke at the opening, there was tremendous optimism at the time that ignition would be achieved in a very short time frame. And I remember saying all that will be left would be the engineering and people laughing. But here we are, it's a slog. It's a slog, and yet the stakes are very high for humanity and our future, not only in terms of zero emission energy, but potentially even for remediation of damage that has already been done. So this is an investment that I think is essential for our future. In your testimony, Dr. Herrmann, you referenced the 2013 National Academy report that basically says the potential benefits of energy from inertial confinement fusion provide a compelling rationale for including inertial fusion energy R&D as part of the long-term R&D portfolio for U.S. energy. However, that followed their other statement, which basically said the appropriate time to establish a national coordinated broad-based inertial fusion energy program within DOE would be after ignition is achieved. So if you don't make the investment, you'll never get in ignition. Can you help us understand these two apparently conflicting comments?
Well, I guess I see it as that they can be complementary in this way. When ignition is achieved, and I think it's a when, not an if, it will be a potential different path with different risk compared to magnetic fusion. So it's an attractive option that mitigates risk in this high, this very technically risky endeavor. At that time, it would be appropriate to have a very broad-based approach, which would mean we're looking at the drivers, the targets, the chambers, everything that needs to be put together to to develop an energy source. Until that time, though, it seems to me that we would be in a better position if we were doing a small level of investment, a modest program that is looking at technology development, because technology is moving forward, and then the U.S. would be in a position to really assess what are the impacts of these advances and be in a better position when ignition eventually happens.
Well, and I'd just like to note, I mean, 25 years ago, when I first started meeting with fusion scientists, I came into the understanding that there are divisions, you know, magnetic and ice, and it's almost a religious belief. I don't share those conflicts. Whatever works, I'm for all the science, and I think as time has gone on, the scientists have gotten to that position as well. I understand, you know, actually in 2016, working with Secretary Moniz, I asked him to put together an assessment of the current status of federal support for inertial fusion energy and potential action items. He did with the career professionals in the department. Now, we've had some personnel changes at DOE, but the career professionals are still there. And it's my understanding that really this is not a partisan issue. It never has been, hopefully never will be. So, Dr. Van Dam, do you agree with the recommendations of the National Academy's report that has been referenced in terms of the development of inertial fusion for energy applications, that they're still worth addressing? Do you think we should find a way for strong merit-reviewed proposal for inertial fusion energy research?
Thank you, and let me begin by saying thank you so much for your passionate interest in fusion energy, be it magnetic or inertial or both. The administration follows the recommendation from the National Academy report that the appropriate time for the establishment of a coordinated program in inertial fusion energy would be when ignition is achieved. And so at the present time, it does not support large-scale investment by the Office of Science at the present time. I'm sure that Dr. Herrmann's efforts will bring that to pass soon. And our investments in FES are then appropriately limited as well. We do invest specifically in IFE technology through the SBIR program for drivers and diagnostics. At the same time, we are supporting the science that underlies IFE and HEDLP.
Let me ask you, Dr. Herrmann, I was stunned by your testimony that a 30% enhancement, the models show us we get to ignition. Now, you've made tremendous changes in performance of the NIF in your tenure as director since 2014. Is that enough to, if absent significant reductions in support, can you envision getting that 30%? Can you tell us where you're going to be, or on your best estimate, with even support?
I frequently say you have to be an optimist to work in fusion.
Or to be in Congress?
We have very sophisticated simulations that guide us in the work we're doing. We find when we do experiments, and we've been developing better diagnostics, that there are gaps between what our simulations say and what we observe. If we can close those gaps, then the simulations suggest that we should be able to get over the threshold and get to ignition. And we see promising paths forward. So we're making progress, and that's the reason for my optimism. But we don't know until we get there if we'll be able to get there or not. I feel like we've gone a big part of the way to where we need to get to, and so that's, and I think there's a large parameter space and an incredibly dedicated team of brilliant scientists and engineers working on it. So I think if we have the wherewithal to continue, we will eventually get there, but I don't know.
I think my time has expired. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman from California. Mr. Rohrbacher is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Van Dam, how much money has been spent on trying to produce fusion energy so far?
My goodness. By the U.S. or by countries?
No, by everybody, but U.S. and then everybody.
I would have to take that on as a homework assignment.
We don't know?
Well, are you talking about integrated over the past 40?
Well, we're talking about a
40-some years?
major project here. You don't know how much money has been expended so far by the people who are engaged in this coalition to create fusion energy?
Are you speaking of ITER?
I'm talking about fusion energy now.
We have a current FY 2019 budget request of $340 million.
We do, right?
Yes,
And
to the Congress, and then it's up to you, of
Okay.
course. The FY 17 enacted was 380. Before that, it was a bit higher, it was running about 400 million per year.
Okay, so you know the budget for the last 2 or 3 years, but before that, have we spent billions of dollars on fusion energy over the years and with our allies?
Yes.
And billions and billions. How much, have we had any actual realization at all of something other than the computer models that suggest that we're going to get there? Have we had an ignition of fusion, man-made fusion energy?
Well, there are two examples, one in the US, one in Europe. The US example was the TFDR tokamak at Princeton. This was at the late 90s, and they got very close to break even. The Joint European Torus, likewise around the same time, got even a little
Okay,
bit
very
better.
close
Yes.
is not yet, right?
Well, those were still smaller machines.
Yeah, but we're very close doesn't work.
Well, there's break even. and
Do we have
initial-
man-made fusion energy? Do you have something went on for a minute worth of fusion energy? No.
Well, national security applications, but they don't last that long.
Meaning, okay, well, let us note that we've had very little physical evidence that it's actually happening. We got a lot of computer models here, and let me just note that I've been here for a while, I've seen a lot of computer models that didn't work. And is it possible that we will get to the end of this project and it won't work?
I sincerely hope not, and the best.
That's not, no.
Okay.
Is
Best
it
pro-
possible that it won't work?
The best projections from experiments that we have done over the past decades, and our experience, the database, the computer modeling, and the new technology that we have, we think it will definitely work. I think Dr. Bigot would like to answer
We
this
think,
question.
okay. Let me just note this, that I would love to believe in the dream of fusion energy. I'd love to believe that. And it's possible, from what people say, it's possible we will get there. But we know that with the expenditure of the kind of money that we've spent on fusion energy, we could have developed fission energy alternatives that are for sure, not just computer models, but are for sure. And we have nobody, when we were interviewed about those models, saying, well, I think. No, they are very sure. General Atomics, for example, has come up with a number of alternatives that they know they can complete. And I would suggest that with the limited amount of money that we have, that we should be going for those things that we know we can actually do when it comes to the nuclear energy production of electricity. And this project has been going a number of years. We're spending billions of dollars, and we still do not know for sure whether or not there will be the type of ignition that we keep spending money on. Let me just note that we do have byproducts, and let me tip my hat to General Atomics and others involved in this project. Mr. Chairman, there are byproducts that we have had from this research that have permitted the development of new materials and things such as that may, in the end, turn out to be worth the investment without fusion. But in terms of actually producing energy, I think the American people deserve us to go for a for sure outcome of electricity that we could spend the same amount of money on rather than something that could work because the computer models tell us so. Dr. Bigot, go right ahead. I know you're anxious to refute that or say something good about it. Please use my time to do that.
If I may, just a second.
Yes.
From my point of view, we have achieved what the computing modeling has been able to achieve, which means the jet, we know, it could not deliver more than 70% of the fusion power it received.
Was that 70 or 17?
70, you see. Because of the size, is it not possible to have, okay, a net fusion power? But we had fusion power, but not a net outcome. Is why with ITER, we need a larger, okay, tokamak, we need a larger vacuum vessel, and the expectation is to have 10 times fusion power that we will feed in with the heating system. 500 megawatt of fusion power. So everybody in this audience has to understand there is a minimum size if you want to get, okay, fusion power. You need to have a sufficient number of fusion events per unit time in order to deliver. So my understanding is so far, the computer modeling has done very well, and is why, from my point of view, I am confident that if we are able to assemble properly all the components making this ITER facility, we will deliver.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, if that hadn't confused you, Congressman, he can keep talking.
Yes.
I think what he's saying is that we're making progress, and so I'm glad that he's here and explaining it to us. The gentleman yields back. I appreciate that. Mr. McNerney, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, I thank the chairman. I thank the panel. I have to say I've been an enthusiast for fusion energy since college, since graduate school. I worked with Los Alamos Labs at the time on inertial fusion. But we have a lot of progress, and I really truly believe that humanity is going to depend on fusion power for the long run. I mean, I don't see any other energy source that's going to really supply our human race with enough energy in the long-term future than fusion. So I'm going to continue to support the progress. Dr. Van Dam, you said that U.S. is the leader in the computer modeling of fusion. What gives us the ability to be the leader? Is it the computer power that we have, or is it the computer scientists? What is it that gives us that leadership?
It's on. Yes, a couple of things. We have very advanced leadership class computing facilities, Oak Ridge and Argonne. We have a National Energy Research Computer Center out in California, which when it started actually was a magnetic fusion energy computer center, and then it broadened to the entire Office of Science. We have these SciDAC, the Scientific Discovery Through Advanced Computing Program, which brings together the subject matter experts in physics and science with applied mathematicians and computer scientists, and this is very powerful. I've seen results of computer simulations gone from half the time required to do them, just because the mathematicians and CS people have been involved.
So is our leadership being challenged by the supercomputers that they're building in China now, or other, or is it just the major infrastructure that we have that allows us to maintain that leadership?
Other countries do have very powerful computers. You mentioned China. We are trying to make up for it with intelligence and the way we use them. But yes, we do need to move on. Exascale is a very big priority in the administration, and even after that, quantum information science.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Wade, you mentioned that there needs to be a comprehensive plan for fusion. Is there an outline for such a plan that we can consider, or are we I mean, as my colleague Bill Foster said, it's like fractal. The closer you look at it, the more sort of different approaches there are. How can we get our hands around this thing?
Well, first off, let me just say that when I speak of a comprehensive strategic plan, I'm talking about getting to fusion energy, not just the next steps in what fusion energy
Right.
is. And so we have to have a goal. We have to have an objective for the U.S. of what that is, on what time frame. So I think we need to establish that. I think is the framework of a strategic plan that has been encouraged through processes that the Fusion Energy Sciences Division has organized through their advisory committee. But that look more closely at the near term than the long term. And I think we need to try to understand where we want to go in the long term to do that. So for example, right now we're focused a lot on plasma physics, a lot on confinement. To ultimately deliver fusion, you have to get into materials, you have to get into technology for fuel, tritium fuel cycle handling, things like that. These are technologies that are not just off-the-shelf things. They're not going to be developed in another area. They have to be developed within the fusion context. And so these are things we should be looking at and trying to figure out where we need to go to be the leaders in that. So I think there's a framework in place to start from the plasma physics side and the burning plasmas that we'll get in ITER. But we also need to fold into that what technologies we need to develop in the future and start that work now rather than later. Because if we start later, we're just going to make this a serial process that takes for a very long time to do.
Okay, well, we're going to depend on you to point us in the direction of a plan so that we can at least get our hands around that. Dr. Herrmann, welcome to my little section of the world here today. I appreciate it. I've been to your facility many times. I appreciate what all is involved. And I understand that your real mission is the stockpile maintenance and so on. But you have such a world-class facility. How can we more expand that facility to use in terms of developing fusion power? I know that NNSA is very protective of your facility. How can we expand that a little bit?
Thanks for the question. Going back to the very original documents that the key decisions that led to the creation of the NIF, it was recognized that inertial fusion energy was one possible application. This was all when the department was the Department of Energy before NNSA was created. And in those documents, it says that some fraction of the time on the facility would be open to the scientific community. And so we do open up about 8% of NIF's time to the outside academic community. And that has allowed us to do world-leading science and attract future stockpile stewards and collaborate with scientists, great scientists at academic institutions around the U.S. Because there currently isn't really a funding path for researchers who want to do IFE, we don't really get proposals in the area of IFE into that open call for time on NIF. And so I think it's a kind of a chicken and egg thing. It's hard to get the researchers to put in proposals because they don't have a path to get research funding. So if there was such a path, I think that would be a way that some of that time could be used for fusion energy research.
Thank you again. I thank the panelists. I'm going to have some questions for the record since I'm out of time here. I'll submit those later.
Thank the gentleman from California. The gentleman from Oklahoma is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel for being here today. We have kind of drifted from the specifics to the general and back and forth in this conversation. So first, let me turn to Dr. Bigot. Those are most impressive pictures compared to the last time several members of the committee were on site at ITER, the progress that's been made. You said in your written testimony, you used the phrase in referencing ITER's magnitude and complexity, quote, "No country, not even the most advanced, could have done this alone," unquote. Could you expand for a moment on the magnitude of the overall cost projected for the whole project and the number of disciplines and the number of engineering and scientific people required to get to this point?
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, clearly this tokamak, which is the largest we are ever conceived to build in the world, is associating many technologies. First, clearly, okay, the magnets, okay, and we have to develop these superconducting materials. Nearly, okay, 2,800 tons of this material has to be developed and with high standard. Vacuum, we need to make a vacuum in a chamber which is nearly 1,000 cubic meter. And we will deal with hydrogen, as you know, which fuse a lot. So we need to develop some specific pumps for that. And the US are performing quite well on this matter. Is another matter we need to have, okay, the US delivering on time. There is also all the heat exchanging. Okay, we are producing 500 megawatt, and on a square meter, we will be able to collect 20 megawatt per square meter. So all these technologies are so large that, and the size of the material is so important that we don't believe a single country could develop an industry in order to deliver on a reasonable time. We will deliver nearly the full construction in 25 years. And so we have the 7th largest country in the world together. And so you could imagine that even a single one could take maybe 4 or 5 times more. So it will not be expected. Just to give you an example, one sector of the large vacuum vessels, which is manufactured right now in Korea. It takes 4 years for the most advanced company in the world in order to be able to manufacture these sectors. Why? Because we need a very high precision. We need also full reliance because it's nuclear, vessel. So no leaks at all. Every welding has to be precisely, controlled. So my understanding is very clear. If we are not working all together, bringing the added value of our expertise and competence worldwide, it will be very challenging to do it.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Van Dam, various comments have been made about the different theoretics and the different perspectives, the different ways of coming about trying to address fusion. Could you touch for a moment on what varieties of fusion research programs are being pursued in other countries? We've listened to discussions about the United States. We know at ITER, the consortium we're a part of, but what's the rest of the world up to?
Yes. The U.S., I think, is a world leader. No question
Absolutely.
about that. The Europeans have a very vigorous program in fusion energy and have had for some time. And we collaborate with them, for example, on the Joint European Torus, which is in the UK and it's being impacted by Brexit. We work on the W7X Stellarator, which is the world's largest in Germany. We work on the tokamak in Germany, another tokamak in Germany. We work with all of the countries in collaboration. Japan has a very vigorous program, and I myself have been going there for almost 40 years to do research. China has a very strong program right now. They're spending a lot of money in fusion energy. They're very serious about it. South Korea as well, India likewise. The Russian Federation used to historically have a very strong program, and we competed with them. And it is still strong. They have a lot of legacy work, but a lot of those scientists have migrated to the U.S.
One last question, Dr. Van Dam. Whether you are the optimist and you believe when the technology breakthrough comes, or you're a pessimist and you believe if the technology breakthrough comes, describe to us where will the United States be if we don't participate, if we're not a part of these efforts, if we're not doing the research? Where will we be if or when, I would hope when, this happens? Describe for us just a moment what the world will be like for those who are not a part of this energy source.
The ITER project, I believe.
ITER or the concepts of fusion in general. If we get to the point where we have successful fusion power generation, but we've not participated, we're not a part of any of the endeavors, we've decided we don't want to spend any money, describe for a moment what it will be like to be left out of the next generation of energy.
Well, fusion and also fission provide base load energy, which is something that renewables don't quite provide. And they're also load following types of energy, which is very important for large industry and just our standard of living. If we are not in the ITER project, it may still go forward with the other 6 members. We would have to decide what our program, we still have the same priorities in terms of burning plasma science, but how they would be implemented. And for the rest of the answer, I would like a crystal ball.
Bottom line is, of course, if success comes and we're not a part of it, then we'll become a second-class economic power because we will not be able to participate in the current technology at that moment of cost-effective energy for all purposes. Thank you, Doctor. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. Gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us on a very interesting and very important topic. As the only member representing the state of New York on this science committee, I want to address a disturbing budget cut that was brought to my attention. The Omega Laser Facility at the University of Rochester's Laboratory for Laser Energetics has been targeted for severe cuts and a 3-year ramp down in the fiscal year 2019 budget request. I, along with many of my colleagues, strongly believe that Omega deserves continued support and that eliminating the facility would be detrimental to national security and the continuity of our nuclear program. Omega provides scientific and technical support for the 400 users from the 55 universities and over 35 centers and national laboratories that use Omega annually to conduct more than 2,100 experiments in cutting-edge research. Currently, demand for these facilities exceeds available time by a factor of 2. LLE's benefits go well beyond the more than 2,100 experiments Omega conducts annually in support of the ICF program. LLE employs more than 360 scientists, engineers, and technicians, and support staff. LLE draws 400 scientists from around the world to Western New York every year to carry out fundamental research, training, and education. LLE provides a strong stimulus to New York's economy as a source of new startup companies and a driver of the region's optics, imaging, and photonics sector. The LLE's Omega laser facility is a vital contributor to national security and an invaluable source of scientific education and leadership. The LLE is the most cost-effective facility in the science-based stockpile stewardship program, performing 80% of all the targets shot used in the National Inertial Confinement Fusion, or the ICF, and high-energy density physics programs, with only 13% of NNSA's ICF budget. LLE is internationally recognized for its groundbreaking research in high-energy density physics and high-power lasers. The Omega Laser Facility, indeed, is the major DOE facility that trains graduate students, serving as a critical pipeline for future talent that is critically important to our national and economic security. So I would ask any or all of our witnesses, have you heard any explanation for the cuts to the Omega Laser Facility at the University of Rochester's Laboratory for Laser Energetics? Anyone?
The Department of Energy, the NNSA budget justification outlined that the resources were shifted to higher priority activities, but we haven't gotten any more details than that in our conversations with the department.
So again, to each of our panelists, if you choose, what impact would these cuts have on the field, on our national security, and certainly on the workforce?
Well, at Lawrence Livermore, we work very closely with the University of Rochester and the Laboratory for Laser Energetics. Omega serves as an important staging ground for performing experiments before they come to NIF to get the data we need for the stewardship program. We work closely with scientists and engineers at the University of Rochester to develop diagnostics for the National Ignition Facility and to move the science forward. And they really play an important role in the entire national community. So I think it would be a very big loss if the Omega Laser Facility were shut down. They're also an important training ground for students who go into this field and can train many future stockpile stewards. Our laboratory has hired many of the scientists who studied or did experiments at the University of Rochester. So I think it would be a big loss to the national program.
And I would think that human infrastructure component is a very critical one. Anyone else from the panel that wants to address the cuts? So Dr. Herrmann and Dr. Wade, there have been some notable efforts made toward progress from those working on innovative fusion energy concepts. And recently, the Tri-Alpha was featured in a cover story of Time magazine for achieving a major milestone, while other smaller companies are making progress in addressing other critical technical challenges. If these innovative companies and approaches cannot find funding here in the U.S., just where will they go, do you imagine?
Well, to answer your To give you some background, these companies like Tri-Alpha have made tremendous progress in looking at the areas that they're looking at. But as Mr. Weber, the chairman, said at the beginning of this, the goal is to get high density, high temperature for long periods of times. And these confinement concepts are well behind in terms of the tokamak, in terms of their maturity. They're making tremendous progress, and they may someday be able to get to tokamak levels of performance. In terms of investment by other countries, I would anticipate that China would be involved. China has almost like an Apollo program in almost every energy sector, and so they're launching initiatives in a wide range of areas. Worldwide, if you look at the rest of the world, the fusion effort is primarily focused on the tokamak and bringing that into full maturity, bringing other lines that are at second level, second tier, along at a slower pace. So I don't anticipate a large investment worldwide. Probably in China there'll be some effort, and there may be sovereign funds that invest in small startups to give them seed money to see if they can actually get to the point of making one of these concepts a reality.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is an exciting and interesting topic. Let's jump in. Dr. Wade, you stressed that U.S. leadership in fusion research is threatened by large investments by other nations. What level of investment is required for us to compete here? I'm looking for a number.
Well, that's a very good question. I think that the level of investment we're making right now is not sufficient. I think that especially when you look at the domestic program and the level of funding that it's at, it's barely at a stage where we can sustain our leadership, much less exert leadership. If I were recommend a number, I would recommend a factor to 2 or 3 increase in fusion funding in the U.S. from the point of view that there are multiple initiatives that we are unable to fund that I think would have benefit, not just in providing us an alternative to this mainline approach, but to get more people involved in the fusion endeavor,
Sure.
which I think is very important.
And you mentioned the in-kind donations, which I think are terrific because we keep some talent here and grow our knowledge base. So you've been involved in both the D3D project and the ITER project. What's the major difference between those two?
The major difference is, well, ITER is about 4 times the size of D3D, so it's a much larger facility. D3D is a much more flexible facility in the type of research it can carry out. It's small. It has many capabilities that allow it to the researchers to manipulate the plasma in a way.
But the physics are kind of all the same.
Physics is exactly the same. It's just at larger scale.
Okay. Can you share some of the spin-off applications that have come out of this program?
Oh, there have been a huge number of spin-offs in a variety of areas, microwaves, MRIs. One of the best ones I like to use is if you're familiar with the recent deployment of the EMAL system, Electromagnetic Advanced Launch System, on the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier. This has replaced all the catapults with electromagnetic systems so that they can reduce the footprint of the steam required to do the steam catapults, and this has allowed and also much more controlled takeoff, less stress on the plane, less stress on the pilots. And so these are spin-offs that not only we're doing this in basic technologies, but in very applied defense technologies also.
Do you interact with the MAG Lab in Tallahassee, FSU?
We have interacted with them. We do not have a strong collaboration. We have had discussions with them.
One thing you said earlier impressed me. You seemed very, very confident that the ITER facility is going to be able to achieve the sustained fusion and actually even, it sounded like you were saying, and it will be commercially viable. Can you share your optimism with us?
Yes, I believe ITER is, I have very high confidence ITER will succeed. I have worked in this field a long time, and I have watched the progression of our understanding, and I believe our understanding is sufficient to have high confidence if technically ITER with its systems can deliver the technical capability. The physics will be there to deliver the power that is projected. And I think that launches us into a new era in fusion development. I think that countries, nations, people worldwide will recognize that this is a real energy source for the future, and we can launch aggressively into that. And if the U.S. isn't there at the table ready to do something, we're going to be left behind by other nations in delivering that technology for the world.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Bigot, certainly sounds like he has a lot of faith in you. Do you share his optimism?
Yes, I share. As I said to you, we have the background of several decades of works on smaller devices and smaller facilities, which demonstrate that the physics is robust, okay, the modeling is robust, and my expectation is if we are able to assemble this larger scale facility, we will deliver.
Well, Godspeed to all of you. Thank you very much for being here. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I'd like to start out by seconding Representative Tonko's, unhappiness with the zeroing out of LLE. You know, I think this will be tremendously damaging, including to NIF. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it sort of serves as something analogous to what a test beam used to serve for high-energy physics, where I worked for decades, that you actually need when you have a bright idea for a new experiment. You need a low-cost way of testing it out. In addition, when you look at the way forward, one of the most promising ways to actually get, to ignition is to switch over to direct drive, and which means that you have to then compress in all directions simultaneously, which is something that can be done today, albeit at a lower energy, at Rochester. And so, the wisdom of cutting this is really something I don't appreciate. The other thing is, we're seeing more and more this statement that, well, there just isn't enough money. And so I'd like to try to put that in context. Since the economic recovery started, the net worth of Americans has gone up by $45 trillion. Well, what we're debating here largely, the U.S. investment in ITER will maybe be $4.5 billion. Okay, and so we're talking about spending, 1/10,000th of the increase in the U.S. wealth that's happened on something that can provide energy in principle for millennia. And so, there's, I think, a pretty strong case to be made that especially now that the economy has recovered, we are actually, this is going to be money well spent. And I do appreciate the bipartisan enthusiasm we've seen for almost bipartisan enthusiasm for fusion generally. Though I would also like to point out that for those of my colleagues that don't appreciate the difference between fission and fusion, then I'd be interested in knowing whether they're volunteering their district to be the storage location for all of the fission end products at the end of the energy production. All right, now a few specific questions. Bernard, one of the things that I've always found useful to look at in understanding whether a project is on track is you look at the contingency reserve, which you highlighted in your previous testimony, that you've established, a project reserve, which I guess in the U.S. we talk as contingency. And so I always used to track the amount of contingency remaining versus the fraction of project completed, and to see if this extrapolates above or below zero, to see if your project's heading for trouble. And is that something that you have, over the last, I guess, 3 years, have been tracking, and what would that graph look like?
Thank you for this important question. There is contingency, for example, in the US program. For providing the in-kind US contribution, the US, according to their regulation, has decided to put some contingencies. So the contingencies are in the in-kind for the production. Some other countries behave differently, but this is on the responsibility of the ITER members. Within the ITER organization, when I came in, I was requested to provide the best technically achievable schedule at the lowest cost, without contingency. Since that time, I have developed a risk management, and I request all my colleagues on the amount of money, what we call the overall project cost for the ITER organization, to make a 8% saving every year. In such a way, I am building up some contingencies in order to facing the risk.
Now, is this contingency fungible across national boundaries?
Yes.
Like if country X gets in trouble on their project, can the contingency from savings from country Y being used to bail them out? Or is there a firewall?
No, there is a firewall, exactly. Okay. For the in-kind contribution, there is a firewall. Each ITER member is responsible to deliver the in-kind contribution. But for the ITER organization, the cost of the assembling, for example, the commissioning, and all these things, okay, it is a share according to the share. Okay, the US is 9%, Europe 45%, all the non-European country is also 9%. And if I want to point something very clear, for the US participating in the ITER project is 9% of the value of the project, but they will have access to 100% of this facility. So I guess it's a clear, good investment.
That's sort of the benefit of scientific collaboration since science began, that if you collaborate, you learn more. So let's see. Dr. Van Dam, you mentioned that there was an ongoing the administration was going to review the nuclear program generally, science specifically, and you were involved in, the budget passback and all of the things which came to the conclusion, for example, that you had to shut down LLE and preserve D3D and all these sort of Sophie's choice decisions that you have to make during the budget decisions. And could you describe, obviously you can never discuss those in public, that's for reasons we understand, but could you describe the list of scientists above you in the org chart that are going to be involved in those sort of decisions?
Well, yes. Directly above me is the Deputy Director for Science, Dr. Steve Binkley. You probably know
Sure,
him.
know him well, yeah.
And above him should be the Director of the Office of Science, which at the moment is still vacant.
All right, and if you continue up
Yes,
the org chart, where do you encounter PhD scientists above that in the org
Well,
chart
Dr.
making
Steve
these
Binkley
decisions?
is certainly a PhD scientist.
Right.
Then above him would be Mr. Paul DeBar, who is the Undersecretary for Science, then the Deputy Secretary and the Secretary himself.
All right, so you've just given us the complete list of, say, PhD scientists who are going to be involved in making these crucial decisions about which facilities can survive in different budget scenarios, for example?
Well, Dr. Binkley has a PhD.
I understand. He's also a permanent employee of
Yes,
DOE,
not a political.
Yeah, because I'm personally very nervous that we're making these really important decisions with, frankly, no one home, with science credentials in making these decisions, and there are real risks to the program if that proceeds. Anyway, I think I've gone past my time.
May I briefly defend Paul DeBar, Undersecretary of Energy, worked in technology for.
Briefly.
I'll finish.
I think the gentleman from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Van Dam, when I was in college 40-some years ago in electrical engineering, they said that we're about 30 years away from actually producing electricity through fusion. And now I hear that we're still 30 years away. I'm wondering, has there been any, let's say in the last, 10 or 15 years, has there been any progress or notable progress towards the goal?
Well, I was also a student 40 years ago, and I heard the same thing. I think people did not realize how challenging this endeavor is. It is a very complex endeavor. It's often called a grand challenge problem. I think we have made tremendous progress, and the National Academy study, in fact, will be documenting that when they do their final report at the end of the year. We've made great progress in control of plasmas, just like with airplanes, in high-resolution diagnostics, high-performance computing, and and also the technology that goes along with it, the heating technology, the magnet technology, and so forth. We have a recent FESAC report on transformative enabling technologies that will enable us even to accelerate faster.
So, okay, so seems like back then there were these goals that were necessary and things that needed to happen to sustain the reaction. And I'm wondering, is there one thing or two things that we need to do over the next 10, let's say 10 years from now, in order to say, okay, we've made real progress? Well, could you name those?
That's a great question, and I'm sure my neighbors would be happy to answer as well. I think we need to stay in the ITER project. And the computing is a very, very big priority for us and for the administration because it lets us take bigger steps forward with confidence, having codes with predictive capability. The experiments, I think, are extremely valuable. We have these very high-performance experiments, 100 million degree plasmas, and we're understanding them at a very precise level.
What was the temperature?
Like 100 million degrees. It's quite impressive.
Yeah.
And we have these diagnostics that can actually see exactly what's going on, coupled with the codes that actually can compute both postdictive and predictive and interpret what's going on. And material studies, we need that desperately.
Is that where we're putting the money?
In the 2019 budget, we propose this linear diverter facility at Oak Ridge. It's called MPEX, Material Plasma
At our
Facility, Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Yeah.
That's one thing we're doing.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back.
All right. And
Mr. Chairman, would
Yes,
it be all right if I had an additional question?
well, we have a meeting right following this, so I said I would encourage you to get with maybe Dr. Van Dam over the Fusion Energy Science Advisory Committee, which offers, has PhDs and offers that advice, but I do need to close it out. I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments and written questions from the members. This hearing is adjourned.